Hello, everyone. Welcome. Thank you all for coming here tonight. My name is Penny Wright. We're delighted to have one of our own Southampton community members here tonight. And his name is Eric Woodward. He's known to many of you, but I'd like to introduce him to those of you who may not know about him. Originally from Boston, after earning a Bachelor of Arts in Architecture from Syracuse University in 1976, Eric Woodward moved to Southampton, where he worked briefly for his uncle, Peter Paul Muller, who had an architectural practice here. He went on to work for local architect Gene Futterman, and in 1987, he established Eric Woodward Architect as the successor firm to Mr. Futterman. Excuse me. During his early years here, he also met and later married, thanks to me, I have to mention this, local resident Hillary Herrick Woodward, and together they have produced two great children, one of whom, Emma, is here tonight. Emma. I take credit for a lot of stuff here. A former president of the Southampton Historical Museum, Eric has been an active member of the community and is a current board member of the Southampton Trails Preservation Society. He has also had a keen interest in the history of Southampton, especially its turn-of-the-century resort architecture. This includes collecting maps, photos, and postcards that show the progression of land uses and building styles in Southampton Village and in the town as a whole. In addition to giving lectures and tours, including a talk for us some years ago titled Southampton Then and Now, which would be another fun thing to have him update here, he has supplied visual material for numerous books on Long Island history and has exhibited at both the Parish Art Museum and the Southampton Historical Museum. When he's not spending time with his family, or I should say, when he's not spending time working, or with his family at their lovely stone cottage in Hampton Park, Eric enjoys bicycling and volleyball and Mexican train. Please welcome Eric Woodward.
Thank you, Penny, and I'm delighted to be here. And I told Penny I'm going to keep a simple presentation this time, and it is my favorite postcards. And there's some qualifications for what would be a favorite postcard. Perhaps scarcity, perhaps the image quality, perhaps the subject matter is unique, or sometimes I pick some that are just public appeal and I thought everybody would like. So you'll see some of each of that category. The category that I'm starting with here is the oldest postcard. Oh, but I figured I should get you prepared. I've got 40,000 postcards in my collection, and I figured at a rate of one every 5 seconds on the screen, this will only take 55 hours. I just should know it. So here we've got the oldest Southampton postcard, and I have chosen this because of that reason. It's not a particularly good image. You can see it's a halftone, which you'll discover shortly was not very common. These cards, this would date 1903. The subject matter is Sayre House, 1648, which was just behind Main Street. This, as postcards do, has a message on it. This house is something, something, something. Hard for me to read it. Technically, it wasn't yet even a postcard. In 1903, they had passed in 1898 a law, a federal law about the mails establishing private mailing cards, which could be sent for a penny. And this is why postcards got to be quite popular, because previously anything you sent through the mail was a letter at 2 cents. Note also the postmark. It was sent on July 31st at 2 p.m. and it was received in Port Washington August 1st, a day later, at 9 a.m. Very common that postcards were even sent in town the same day, they were received the same day they were sent. So we jump to my favorite postcard image of the old Sayre House. This is a photo postcard. You'll find that many of my cards tonight are photo postcards, meaning they are actual photographs printed on photographic paper, developed in a tray, and they used paper supplied by Kodak and other companies that had the postcard back pre-printed. This is by a photographer from Brooklyn called, his last name was Hess, and his pictures are uniformly excellent quality, and you can see the detail. The photographs were 3.5 by 5 negatives, contact printed. The Sayre house was on Main Street, right behind the where the village hall was built, and it was torn down shortly after this photograph was printed. I believe 1905. It doesn't have a date on it. So, starting from the center of town, we have an event of some note that you probably wouldn't find today. This is waiting. This is the hunt starting from Main Street, right in front of the Presbyterian Church. Well dressed horseers. What's the word for somebody doing a hunt? Not a horseer. And the hounds off to the side. Now, if you're a photographer and you're thinking of how to get the unique angle on things, you go, oh, look what's up there, a place I can go, and I can take a photograph to make into a postcard. This is a reasonably common view of bird's eye view of Main Street, looking northwest at the stores along Main Street. Many years after I started, I've been collecting, I don't forget if Penny mentioned, 35 years or so. So many years after I started collecting, I found a very unique card. The previous one was sort of common, but this one's on the favorites list because it's a view in the other direction, which nobody had ever seen. The Historical Museum never had it, never seen records in any publications of this view, which shows the yard of Samuel Parish. The Historical Museum is just off, if you extend it off in this direction, the Historical Museum Samuel Parish residence is off the scene there. So the Historical Museum was delighted to see this picture so they could see what was in the yard at that time. There was no record of a laundry yard and vegetable gardens. The Red Barn is still on the property, and one note about postcards here, you can see the siding is sort of a blue-gray in the postcard. You can't trust the colors in postcards. The photographer took a black and white photograph. The photographs were sent to a printing plant where the colors were added, and they might have gotten it right, and they might have gotten it wrong. We don't know. These are, as I said, lithographs. These were the common type of images that are better than that first card we saw, which was the black and white half-tone. Now we have Main Street, another photo card, and it's Hildreth's. You can see the sign up here, the Hildreth's store, just the way it is today. Quite an early view with horse and buggies, so it's probably still 1905. If I were an expert on automobiles, I'd tell you what year this car was, because it certainly looks pretty old to me. Southampton got to be a busy place, though. I mean, here we are looking at what would have been just newly constructed. This might be 1910, let me guess. Could be as early as 1907. Once again, I don't know my cars well enough. Anybody in the audience who's a car expert? Anyway, this is showing the post office. This building being post office now, being the village hall. Popular place also to pick people up was the railroad station. Interestingly, I wonder if these cars were, it's more likely they were owned by estates and that they were there to collect people perhaps, because I don't know that, well, maybe there were that many local people who owned cars who went into New York for trips. Just speculation. If you were a Southampton visitor, you might stay at the Irving House. The Irving was a popular hostelry on the corner of Hill Street and First Neck Lane. And tons, I must have 60 postcards just of the Irving House. They enlarged the place again and again and again, so it seems like every year they had to make new postcards, which is good for the postcard collector. This again is a hand-colored from a black and white photograph and then printed lithography. The printing plants were generally in Germany at this point, this being 1910, 1912, and the best printing came from Germany, and the clouds were painted in, the flag was painted in. Here is the same view from my favorite photographer, Hess. He doesn't always have his name on the back of the cards, but he does. You can see here, this printing is very distinctive. And also the quality of his cards stand out. The printing, the developing, and the fact that they've lasted 100 years in such pristine condition make his cards stand out beautifully. Southampton Hospital. This is the original hospital. It still exists. This building is right across the street from the entrance to the hospital. You can see it when you go by. Busy summer overflow. So not only were there photographers who were professionals like Hess, there were also amateurs who printed their own postcards. And so it's really neat when you find postcards that are labeled Southampton, Elm Street, so you know where it is, but it isn't commercially available image that you could have seen previously. I was able to buy 4 postcards from this group recently on eBay. That's the current best source of postcard purchases is on eBay. About 15 years ago, I was fortunate enough to be offered a collection of cards of the Parrish family. So here we have the Samuel Parrish family in front of the fountain at the Parrish Art Museum grounds. I haven't ever actually had a historian verify it, but I'm pretty sure the guy here with the well-dressed with the mustache is Samuel Parrish, and very likely the rest of the family members. Still to be verified. On the opposite end of the scale, we have here a generic card. So generic they didn't even know how to spell Southampton right now. But what you did is you bought the card, and to make life easy, you fill in the blanks. It started hello, and you could choose to check out sugar, or babe, or ball and chain. So I just blew in, and I need lovin'. This bird is out of sight, and I am hot and bothered, etc., etc. So, being an architect, you'll find a lot of my favorites are houses and buildings. So here we have the view, southern end of Main Street, where it meets Gin Lane. These houses are all still there. Many fewer trees. Many fewer trees. Photo card of the end of Lake Agawam. Once again, 1905 vintage, perhaps. Here's Hess's St. Andrew's Dune Church and Lake Drive. When I had this postcard for a while, I thought, you know what? I should color this. Hand coloring is pretty neat, but let's see. So I did the colored version. And once again, Hess's developing in detail is exemplary. We'll see the house in the middle here, Thomas House later. This was the first oceanfront resort house in Southampton. So we have the bathing pavilions heading over the dune to the beach. It's fun to see what people were wearing. We also see I forgot the name of it, Bower, which was a temporary summertime structure. Oak branches were put up for shade. And clearly people were interested in safety. Bathing outside the line's dangerous. So they even at this early time, and some ocean safety awareness. Along about, well, between 1915 and 1930, You know, I was saying the cards came from Germany. Well, after 1913, no more cards were coming from Germany. For some reason, the white border postcard became popular. This is an example of that, and it would have been between 1915 and 1930, postcards had that type of border. Bathing Pavilion and Thomas's house are still there, but cards have changed for sure. Shortly after that card would have been printed, the Southampton Bathing Corporation was established, built, and here's a wonderful card showing a very popular, looks like they're having a race at the club. Probably 1920s. Time passes, and we have a shot which I'm guessing, I'm not positive, was after 1929. And I use this as an example of postcards reflecting the change in mood, the depression. And you go from that previous shot, you go from that to that. This is probably 1920s. It's fun to see what people were wearing on the beach in the 20s. Around 1930, another type of card was introduced on the market, the linen card. And you can see the texture here. The cards had a sort of raised linen type texture. And for some reason, linens almost always have these sort of high key, slightly Faco color tones to them. Here's a card that's back from the early period, but it is printed on leather. It would have been burned by leather. And I don't know whether this was done at home, whether you bought the blank card with the Southampton logo on it already, or whether you buy it with this. I'm showing the back of this card just because it's fun to see. To be a postcard has to say postcard, which is actually different from postal card, which preceded postcards. Postal cards have the stamp already pre-printed by the post office. 1905, you can see the date on here. Meadow Club. Club hasn't changed, but I think, I haven't ever been fortunate enough to play tennis here, but I think the outfits have changed. Not a very professional coloring job. I think they got to put this one through the factory fast. It's still fun watching everybody watching tennis. The life-saving station and crew. This building still exists on the corner of Wyandanch and Gin Lane. It's now a residence. If there's a card I don't have that I know exists, that would be my super favorite. I've seen it, I bid on it even on eBay, but not been fortunate enough to get it, which is the photo version of this same shot. So here is a photo card. The card is actually this down here is the actual postcard, and I did my own coloring and manipulating the image to improve it. This was a shipwreck off of Shinnecock, and shipwrecks were a big deal. You can see the crowd is assembled to see what's going on and maybe even help offload the ship, but it looks like it's still pretty rough, so my guess is that they weren't doing any offloading at that point. And I think the ship did get dragged back out to sea. So we're going to do a group of houses. I haven't used up my whole hour yet. I'm concerned about that. The group of houses here, we have the Captain Green residence on South Main Street, and it was built as a Southampton. He was a captain out of Sag Harbor, and this was prior to the resort. So there were already big fancy houses being built, but subsequent to that, it became a boarding house. The resort went through a phase where people didn't have their own houses, but they were coming out by train. So the boarding houses became very popular. After that, it turned back into a private residence. Stephen Peabody, you see his name on the card at this point. This was probably 1910 when the card was done. After that, some of you might know, it was Rusty Clark's house, the Long Island Automobile Museum. So that house preceded Thomas's house. Here we have Thomas's house. Thomas's house was built in 1877, and as I say, the first house built for somebody from the resort, as a resort house on the ocean. Dr. Thomas was, he brought patients to his house. He was very successful in selling a number of them land. He was the original speculator. And I don't know if he was involved in this, but right next to his house, Fairley was one of the early subdivisions. This is looking from the dunes back toward the north. And by the time this was developed, the shingle style was popular. So you see these wonderful shingle houses, all of which are still there. Only, once again, more trees. This house was built just to the north of Thomas's house, where the bend, where Gin Lane goes around the bend, and it was the Wyckoff residence, and then it was the Donahue residence, and it was torn down about 1940. They tried auctioning it off. Nobody wanted it. Down it came. It is now on the property was vacant for many years, but now is a house, new house of similar grand proportions is being built right there. I show this card because I was involved architecturally with this house. When I was hired to do work on it, it had been converted into a colonial house. Here it's shingle style, but as a colonial house, it was totally symmetrical, totally well-mannered the way colonials are. It had covered up everything except these three dormers on the top were sticking out of the top of the colonial house. And I mean, they're ungainly and weird even on this house. But they were really strange on a colonial version of it. The old mill house. You know, we take it for granted that, oh, if you've got a windmill, you make it into a house, but this is a pretty rare house for any resort. Still there. Here's a photo card looking north along the west shore of Lake Agawam. The house in the center of the picture here was on the Historical Museum's house tour this year. And it looks, I think it's pretty much unchanged from 1910 or whenever this postcard was done. It's I think about to be renovated. And as you look up the lake, you can see building houses was a popular pastime. I've always loved this house architecturally. This sort of shingle meets Swiss meets arts and crafts. And this house has just recently been added to and renovated. John David Rose was the architect. He did an excellent job keeping the house where it was good and adding to it. South Main Street, second house from the end of South Main Street. Here's a house which is no longer Kendall Cottage. I forget where it was, but it was actually torn down, I think, in the 70s. But it was a shingle-style house of some note. The postcards, I've always got my eye out for a house that I've never seen any pictures of. It's getting rare. There's a story here. Many years ago when I was working for Gene Futterman, I brought him a little etching, a picture that was in Harper's, 1897 Harper's Magazine, about this big of a house. It's a typical Southampton house. And he said, well, that would be the perfect house for the Adlers. Let's try to figure out how to redo that house. And we did, and we built it. We built it down at the end of Dune Road. At that point, no other houses down there. It was where the helicopter landing place is. It's called White Caps. It turned out, a little while after we built it, there was a historian from New York who did a tour of McKim-Mead White Houses, and it was a McKim-Mead White House, and it had been actually built in Southampton, opposite the Meadow Club, and it was washed out to sea in 1938. But there were no photographs of it. The historian said, we don't have any photographs. And I looked and looked for photographs, no photographs. Holy grail of postcard collecting. One day at the postcard show, there it was. And it turned out that we had actually done an excellent job. It looks just like that. The wing was newer. We didn't know that there'd ever been a wing at it, but the main core of the house was delayed. So now I've got one postcard of it. Hopefully I'll find maybe a view of the other side. Not all the house postcards were a big house. Cottage of Miss Pauline Dupont. Woolton Manor. Here we got another later postcard. By later, I mean this might have been 1930. Quality is down, but notable house on the ocean that still exists. This was built as the playhouse for the Wyckoff House when Donahue owned it, and Donahue had married Woodward. Yeah, I've got her first name here. I didn't want to call her Woodward. Jessie. And over here was somewhat unusual feature. There was an indoor swimming pool in a greenhouse, a substantially big swimming pool. That got blown over in 1938, but the house stays. Another house disappeared or got damaged enough that it was torn down in the hurricane. Residence of J.C. Thaw. This was on Gin Lane on the ocean. You can see it's a later house. It was probably built teens or maybe even early 20s. I should know the date, but I don't. J.C. Thaw's brother was the person who killed Stanford White. And rumor has it he did occasionally visit his brother in his house, but kept a low profile. The carriage house still exists here, and you can see in the carriage house some of the wonderful details that house has. Residence of A.B. Boardman, another house that was built later and didn't last, might have lasted into the 50s. It was on Cooper's Neck Road. Claridge Cottages. I include this because it's an unknown building. I don't know, never been able to trace it or find it, but once again, S is the photographer. Once again, he spells Southampton. Mr. J. Eimer's cottage. It's on John Street. Still exists. And Mr. Eimer was Swiss, and he brought some of the traditions of don't want your house to blow away. This is arts and crafts to the nth degree. Inside now, it's covered with all sorts of wonderful arts and crafts details, including here bas-relief busts in concrete. Okay, who knows? Who can identify this photo? I'm glad everybody's stumped. This the corner of Hampton Road and David White's Lane. This is Dr. Berger's office. And
Dr. Bellows.
Dr. Bellows.
Yeah. Sometime soon after this photograph was made into a postcard, which would have been 1910 perhaps, it was converted into a more stylish craftsman style house. But they just added a different porch with a sweeping roof. And if you've been in that building, you know that it's actually colonial vintage when you look at the ceiling heights, which are pretty low. I picked this one as a favorite, even though it's got a messy postmark on it and it's a crease, just because of how it was when it was sent, how somebody here wrote with a mark on this side, J. Herrick's dugout, and this is, of course, the Herrick's property over here. And then this path is worn greatly across to J. Terry's borough. J. Terry lived across the street. But the best part of the triangle is at the vertex, Polly Corwin. But he obviously liked Polly Corwin. But not all was well in Southampton. Here we have an X where Ginger was run over. That's too bad. Yeah. And early car was probably a car that run her over. Now we'll venture north from Southampton up to where Hillary and I live, Hampton Park. This was the Southampton on the Hills colony. Once again, you look at the quality of the car, you know that it's a later car, probably early 30s. And this bungalow colony was up in the woods. And they were seriously trying to make a resort out of it. Even we have a stock certificate from the company and everything. But I think they might have had a hard time getting people excited to arrive, partly because they advertised ocean view, but they were 3 miles away from the ocean. Now, home of Mrs. Carnegie's niece. I for years owned this postcard and wondered where this house is. And thought maybe Shinnecock Hills or something. Definitely had no idea. It turned out to be the house across the street from Hillary and me. Some of you knew Mrs. Balamuth lived there for many years. And who's it now? Okay. But somebody pointed out to me who knew better than I that was that. I said, oh my gosh, I can't believe it. And so it was fabulous to find that I owned a postcard of a house right there. Now we go further north. This is Hazet, a fabulous rustic style house. 1915, you see the date on it. Near Town Point, overlooking the water. Until recently, Barbara Sloan's house. And it's a fabulous house. It also has a fabulous series of postcards that were made at the time. Here's number 6. This porch. These windows were full glass windows, but they dropped down into pockets, disappeared when the weather was right. Barbara kept the house immaculately in good shape. Unfortunately, the current owners, I'm not even sure if the house still exists. I heard that they were not, the husband and wife weren't quite in agreement on what to do with the house. So this is the interior view. About the beginning of World War II, certainly by the end of World War II, the popular type of postcard was a chrome. And these were colored photographs that didn't have to be colored by hand. They used Kodachrome, which was famous for the dark blue skies. So from here on, postcards have dark blue skies. This being Dean's gas station on the corner of North Sea Road and what is now known as County Road 39. Heading west, Art Village. Wonderful houses in Art Village. The Art Village was established in 1892 and was in conjunction with William Merritt Chase's School of Art, who had a studio here. And I've always been on the lookout for more images of the Art Village. There are only a couple postcards, but one day on eBay, I saw a listing for a somewhat unusual photo card, and they were advertising East Hampton photo card. And nobody bid on it because the East Hampton image here is Home Sweet Home, and there's about 10,000 Home Sweet Home cards. Every card of East Hampton is Home Sweet Home. Nobody wanted it, but nobody noticed that the image on the top is Chase's studio, a rare photograph of the original studio before it was added and converted into a house. So I was delighted to be able to buy it. Here is a photo postcard. I don't remember where I got this one, but it is identified as Southampton. It doesn't say for sure that it's one of the art school students, but it's very likely. She's got her canvas and she's got her palette here, and she's on the way out to do some plein air painting. Simultaneously, possibly, the Chase family. Here, postcard view of them at the dock on Shinnecock Bay. Once again, I'm pretty sure this is Parrish himself here. Yeah. Fresh Air Home. It's fun to find a postcard with some action in it. Shinnecock Hills Golf Club. Again, I chose this as a favorite because of the people in the picture. It's, of course, a notable building also. A notable building which survives intact today. Right next to it, Shinnecock Inn was constructed. Shinnecock Inn was constructed in 1907. You can see it was a very substantial hotel. Next year, it burned down. It had one summer of operation. Fire being a big hazard in Shinnecock Hills because of the railroad. This also, this card is so rare, this image is so rare that when Helen Wetterow wrote her history of Shinnecock Hills, she had to put a drawing of the hotel, and she couldn't find the photograph of the hotel. And she noted that in the book. I decided also to hand color this one to make it a little more dramatic. to admit, I don't know if the trim was really green, but it looks green to me. Here is a photo card of James Parrish's, Samuel Parrish's brother's house in Shinnecock. And this was about where the gymnasium for the college is now. The golf course went, at that point, went across to the south side of the railroad for a couple of holes. And this large house, once again, succumbed to a fire started by the railroad. No longer exists. Shinnecock Canal, clearly before the major locks were built. I'm wondering though whether these are locks or not, even at this early stage. Gates that open and close easily. The original Canoe Place Inn is also burned down. This should have been burned down buildings of Southampton. There are quite a few cards of this, so this isn't a rare image, but it's still neat when you get a good photograph. A little more unusual is an interior shot. This is the ballroom of what replaced the original Canoe Place Inn, and this is about to undergo renovation, and it would be interesting to see whether they resurrect such a grand ballroom or not. Just up the canal from the Canoe Place Inn was the Shinnecock Casino, and the Shinnecock Casino was a popular place to go and not tell anybody you've been there. Hampton Bays. I just love this card just because everybody's having such a good day at the beach. Probably 1910, maybe 1915. Another holy grail for a postcard collector would be cards of the hurricane. Here we have September 21st, 1938. There's one set of 6 cards of the hurricane. I would have thought that this was a popular thing to document, but by 1938, the craze was over. Postcards were not half as popular. People were not buying them, so I have yet to see any other postcards of the hurricane. Now we go the other direction, east, from Southampton to Watermill. Watermill had its own postcard photographer, publisher, and he characteristically made these jagged edges. If you see a card with a jagged edge like this, it's probably, and he also, for some reason, his printing paper was a little bigger than his negatives. There was always a gap on the side. Here we have a wonderful summer scene, though. I picked this one as a favorite just because what atmosphere. Guy sitting with his dog peacefully by the road as the carriage goes by, clip, clop, clip, clop. Nowendoa House. Nowendoa House still exists. I think the mill is just out of the picture on this Watermill Mill. So, how many people have flown out of the Hampton Airport? Nobody? If my mom was here, she would put her hand up. She describes as a teenager, she was fortunate enough to have a friend who had a plane, and it was a thing. Teenage kids, older, probably. Let me guess, they were 17, 18. Would, if you were fortunate, you had a plane and fooled around and had fun. It says near Southampton. It was, actually I shouldn't say was, it still exists. The runway's not there anymore, but the hangar still exists as a farm building. It is, if you go north from the Hayground antique store, next to the Rogers house, whatever that road is to the north. Is it Hayground? It is. It's in a field to the left as you go north. It's got it's all painted bright red. It was covered with polyurethane or something. It's the actual hangar still, used for agricultural purposes. Shermeddon, we're in Bridgehampton. Shermeddon was 1880. which is early. I mean, here we had the first house in Southampton, 1877. So the fact that they were the resort-type house was already being built in Bridgehampton 3 years later is interesting. This is the Estabrook family. They made their money with fountain pens and built a pretty fancy house. This type of house fell out of favor when shingle style came in. This was pre-shingle style. The maintenance on this must have been significant. It did get torn down. The postcard would have been 1905, which is, so the house was already getting old at this point. Another Hess top-notch photograph card. This is the Bascombe, boathouse of the Bascombe estate on Mecox Bay. If you know where the Mecox Bay Yacht Club is, this was adjacent to that and definitely no longer exists. The house itself was 1887. I think this boathouse might have been a little later, but I just love the crisp, clean, modern lines, the round circle, the strip of windows, the unbalance of these two windows below. It's just a superb piece of architecture. The interesting story that this property with the estate, the original house on it, was offered in sometime in the 1940s by heirs. It had been pretty much abandoned. They offered it to the local farming family adjacent to Ludlows, and word is it that the Ludlows said, well, we'll buy your house, we'll buy your property, as long as you agree before closing to tear the house down, so we can farm it. So times have certainly changed in that respect. A chrome postcard in Bridgehampton. The road races were held on a very popular event on Ocean Road for a few years. And it's fun, an action shot here. Another, as an architect, another fun one. The Bridgehampton Motel, proudly promoting their somewhat, at this point, dated design. Maybe it was cutting edge at the time. Actually, maybe it's cutting edge now to architects trying to be modern again. The Salty Dog, Noyak Beach, replaced by condominiums. I include this because colored interior is a rare item, and it's fun to see what the interior of the place looked like. Greetings from Pine Neck. Here, another generic card. I don't think there's any sand dunes that big in Pine Neck, but somebody still paid to publish the postcards and sold them in a tobacconist or some other place. Now we're in Sag Harbor, the watch case factory, newly completed condominium. Sag Harbor, of course, was more urban. Here, the train, the station, the big oil tank, almost looks like a city. Now, I knew for many years there was a whale that they put out in the pond in Sag Harbor. Until I got this postcard, I never knew there were actually two whales. Sage Playgrounds. This is in Mashemeth Park, and I speculate that this was done for the fun of it, this photograph, but I'm not positive. I mean, maybe all these girls were just happened to be playing in the playground when the photographer wandered by, but I have a feeling that this was probably a setup, sort of a joke postcard, to have them all in the sandbox at once. East Hampton. Any Main Street shots are popular among postcard collectors, and the more activity on them, the better. Interesting, there's a logo of Bell Telephone up there. Postcards were used before the telephone became common, almost like telephone, or like instant messaging, because you could send a card in the morning, and oftentimes you'll see a card that says, "I'll be over later today," and the post office would deliver it in time for that message. the beach and bathhouse in East Hampton. I include this one. There are lots of good houses in the East Hampton postcards, but I thought this was fun just because it's a sign that even this would have been 1910. This postcard, even at that point, architects didn't necessarily have boundaries about the size of houses and the appropriate number of different style elements that were stuck in one house. Montauk. This, I think, is somewhat of a rare image of the 193rd Artillery, I guess it stands for, and it says art. And they clearly had quite a band. Well, you can see people with the musical instruments, so that's the type of band it was. But I don't know what these funny tent things are. What they were for? Well, I'd have to ask somebody who knew more about the military at that time. Postcards were also used for advertising. Here in Montauk we have the Mary Edwards, Captain Bert Edwards open boat. Quite a popular, at least on this particular day, it's calm enough. People weren't too seasick. Here we have a chrome postcard that's actually a 3-panel card that you'd fold up when you mailed it. And Montauk has the best bunch of postcards showing 1950s style in their chrome postcards. I used to look down on chrome postcards and think, they're too modern. But I've started collecting them because they do show, as previously, they show the slice of life of the time when they were printed. Back to, you can see the date written on it, 1904, so an early card. Shelter Island also had their own photo postcard publisher, and he always used this rubber stamp, so you can tell it is definitely, this is Darien Harbor. There was no shortage of expensive yachts at this point in Shelter Island. Bathing Pavilion. This card I actually bought on eBay quite recently, and I was so delighted that for some reason there wasn't stiff competition to buy it. It's Sylvester Manor, it's postmarked 1917, and it's the Harvest Festival, and it was actually written with an annotation from C. Horsford. It was Cornelia Horsford, the owner of the property. And clearly, there was quite an event. She had, in 1908, renovated the house. So, it was the Sylvester Manor went through periods of prosperity and not prosperity, and this clearly looks like it was a time, a period of prosperity. Had a harvest festival that was. These weren't dirt poor farmers coming here to sell their cucumbers. So, I collect cards from all of Long Island, but the further away from Southampton it is, the better, the more particular I get. So I collect houses that are of note. Woodmere is right next to Long Beach and Kennedy Airport. And so if I spot a good card like this, I'll snap it up. I have to look at a lot of cards that aren't very exciting when I go to the postcard show, look on eBay. Bayshore, lots of good houses in Bayshore. And once again, S comes through with a fabulous image of this Victorian house. I, once in a while, will venture away from a house. This card, I just couldn't resist because it's so well composed, well developed. I'll also pick up cards occasionally if there's some record of life that you don't normally find in the history books. And so here, these were labeled Long Island, unfortunately no location, but labeled that they were a clam bake. It's part of a series of 3 cards. And a good catch of bluefish in Great South Bay. And last, another generic fun summer activities here printed from Seaford, but you might find any number of communities would have their name on it. So that takes us back to the beginning. We got 5 minutes for questions.
Yeah, it looks thatched, right?
Yes. This shingles were steam vent to give you the thatched roof effect. There was a house in Southampton with this technology on it. Yeah. There was one in East Hampton too.
The trains create more problems than Shinnecock.
Well, the brush, I think maybe.
Eric, can you repeat the question?
Oh, the question was, why did the train create more problems in Shinnecock than in other locations? I think a couple of reasons. One is that the brush, there was a lot of low brush that was very flammable. Another reason was there weren't too many people living there in the winter, so that a fire might not be noticed. The train might go through, sparks fly, and nobody would see the fire until it got to be dangerous. Whereas in town, maybe people ran over and put it out faster. Yep.
The lines from the Shinnecock Canal were dated 1900-something. My impression was that the canal didn't exist until 1948.
Well, that's why I was, the question was, did the postcard shown of Shinnecock Canal predate the 1938 establishment of the canal the way we know it today? Somebody over here mentioned that it looked like there were actually gates prior. The big concrete locks that we have now definitely made it an official lock system, but it looked like maybe that the canal had some sort of water level control, even at the date of even in that postcard. I'm not a historian, so there are a lot of things I don't know. Yeah, the railroad bridge was in the background. Oh, there was water there for sure, and yeah, presumably Native Americans were the original to made it passable from one side to the other. They could take it out. Maybe. I mean, the water levels are different heights at different times on each side. That's the whole reason for the locks. So, who knows what happened the first time you took it out?
Eric, did you say that Stanford White designed Eva Ballamut's house?
No.
He did not?
No.
Do you know who did design it?
No. I'd love to.
It
Definitely had it had an older section and then it had the whole summer wing. It was very much it was in the tradition of Stanford White's own house. It was very much like that because it had a balcony overlooking the living room being a two-story room.
She told me at one point who it was, and I just can't remember. Anyway.
Yep.
Yes, Southampton, Route 39, opposite PC Richard.
Mm-hmm.
The old auto museum.
Yes.
That is hidden.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, do you have any photo postcards?
I have about 300 postcards of the Long Island Auto Museum published. They were published by the Long Island Auto Museum. Most of them are cars, but about 10 of them show the actual museum as a backdrop of the car. And so those make it into my albums. I didn't bring those are in my more modern album. I didn't bring them with me today, but they were a very prolific postcard publisher.
Does anyone know what is going to happen? It just sits there in the brush.
Penny had a presentation by a historian on the Auto Museum.
I believe that property is up for sale.
The family of Austin Clark still own it at this point.
Yeah.
Yep.
Do you shop online for postcards every day?
Yes, twice a day. Because if you're familiar with eBay, there is buy it now. Occasionally somebody puts card up for sale, and you can buy it without going to auction. And if it's a good one, that's what you want, because you can get it before somebody else who's going to pay more bids on it. That doesn't happen too often, but that's why I look lunchtime and after dinner.
Eric, I know there's a big range, but I mean, what would you pay for a postcard that's of moderate interest? I mean,
Moderate interest, $15.
Okay.
Good ones, it's hard to, good ones go for that price because there are enough collectors. Top-notch cards, there have been good active interest in East Hampton recently. Bidders routinely going up to $50 for good cards. Well, when you have, you want to collect in quantity, it can be.
there was another question over here. Was that did you have a
I was
question?
wondering, is there another bidder that you are aware of that you are bidding against usually, or is there another?
Luckily for Southampton, there's not a lot of bidding activity, but in East Hampton, you see the same names again and again. But eBay changed it recently, well, a number of years ago. They changed it that you don't actually see the real bidder name. They put up a concealed facsimile name, so you can tell the same person bids again, but you don't know actually who they are.
You know, the first card that you collected?
I know where. I don't remember what it was, but Hillary and I were traveling in upstate New York, and we used to like going into antique stores, and I was in an antique store, and there was a little tray with some postcards, and I glanced, and I saw a picture of Southampton that I had never seen before. And I thought, wow, look, you can find the pictures of Southampton even up here, upstate. And I bought it, and that was the beginning. It'd be fun to remember which it was, but I don't. And it probably only cost $1 at that point. We took turns on our honeymoon. Postcards and other activities.
Well, I can just tell you, Eric, that we won't tell too many people to take a look at the bidding. We won't. But as you can see, we have a lot more to learn and a lot more to see. So we're hoping that Eric will really, this is such a wonderful, valuable part of our community, Eric, and you're just, I know it must be so much work to go through all these postcards, but we're hereby inviting you to make this an annual event. Anyway, thank you so much for coming. That was just great. Thank you for coming.